It is 7 o'clock. Good to see you this morning. As G7 leaders prepare for a virtual conference, President Biden is weighing up whether or not to give that Kabul airlift operation more time or pull out all US troops from Afghanistan by the end of the month. In just a moment, we'll be speaking to the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace. Does he believe that the Prime Minister can convince the President to stay just a little longer? Also ahead this morning, we'll be taking a look ahead to the opening ceremony of the Paralympic Games in Tokyo and indeed assessing Team GB's chances with the Paralympian and Wafula strike. That at 9:30. It's Tuesday, the 24th of August. The Prime Minister is expected to use G7 talks to try to convince President Biden to extend the evacuation effort in Kabul past the 31st of August. A perilous journey. Sky News films the Afghan citizens given a route to safety as the hours tick down on the airlift operation.
This is their flight out of Kabul. It's been horrendous for them and they're on the way to new lives. It's for them, I think, it's a dream, I suppose, but I think getting to this point has been horrendous for all of them.
For the Afghan staff who aided Britain's work in Afghanistan, we hear of their hopes for their new lives here.
I pick up the gun and shot at Taliban myself to save Britons. So I think it's their turn to help me and my family right now.
Also this morning, the Home Office reports a new daily record for migrant crossings, with 828 people intercepted on Saturday alone.
Good morning. For many of us, the weather has at last settled down. A lovely settled spell of weather with high pressure, meaning fine days, lots of dry weather, lots of sunshine and feeling a little bit warmer as well. I'll bring you all the details later on.
Morning all. The Prime Minister will chair an emergency meeting of G7 nations today, where he's expected to try to persuade President Biden to delay the 31st of August deadline for the Afghanistan withdrawal, allowing more time for the evacuation effort. On the eve of the summit, a US official suggested that President Biden would decide today whether or not to stick to that withdrawal date. Despite the UK pushing for more time, Sky News was told by the Taliban that the agreed date for the pullout is a red line and that there will be repercussions if it's exceeded. Our Foreign Affairs editor Deborah Haynes has our first report.
US forces running Kabul airport are running out of time. Unless their president decides in the coming hours to delay his troops' departure date beyond next Tuesday, they'll soon need to pack up. Once that happens, the UK, other allies, and this whole evacuation effort will have to follow. Boris Johnson is set to use a virtual meeting of G7 powers to find unity after days of friction. In a statement, he said, "Our first priority is to complete the evacuation of our citizens and those Afghans who've assisted our efforts over the last 20 years. But as we look ahead to the next phase, it's vital we come together as an international community and agree a joint approach for the longer term." It means for those desperate to leave right now, they're living on borrowed time. The Prime Minister is expected to urge Joe Biden to keep his forces in Afghanistan a few days more, but any extension would preferably need buy-in from the Taliban too, and they've told Sky News August the 31st isn't just a deadline, it's a red line. Stay longer, and there will be consequences. In Washington, Biden's national security advisor was asked about the warning.
We are in talks with the Taliban on a daily basis through both political and security channels. I'm not going to get into the details of those discussions here to protect those discussions, which are covering a wide range of issues.
There's also a growing terrorist threat the longer the evacuation goes on. It all makes for a chaotic exit that's straining the UK's special relationship with the United States.
They do care about what the UK thinks and also other allies. And I think that the US military cares very much about what the UK military thinks. They work closely on the ground, and that will have some bearing on what President Biden decides.
It's a matter of life and death for those waiting to hear when the last flight will be. Deborah Haynes, Sky News.
Very pleased to say the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace joins us once again on the programme. Minister, good to see you this morning, and of course a lot for us to discuss in terms of the G7, but I wonder if we can start with the operation on the ground in Kabul at the moment. Can you just give us the latest on Operation Pitting, the numbers evacuated and quite how close we might come to just getting everyone out of the country?
Well, look, we're not going to get everyone out of the country. I've been consistent throughout the last few weeks on that. The good news, however, is that we have evacuated over 2,000 people in the last 24 hours. That's another sort of 700 extra than we did last 24 hours. It means we evacuated 8,600 people since the beginning of this in August the 14th, and indeed over 10,000. So we've broken the 10,000 barrier since April of all the Arab, British nationals and other entitled personnel to come out of the country. That is a significant piece of work. We have our flow of aircraft steady. We have availability, and the challenge is really getting people to the airport, to the processing centre, and then taking onto the plane. So the key thing is the flow of people into the airport, and some of that is not within our control. That's getting through Taliban checkpoints. That is the journey from Kabul to the airport, and then finally when they get there, there's about, for example, 3,000 people outside the British controlled gate or the British-US controlled gate, where we need to have a flow that's constant to allow people in. And there's some nearly 15,000 people around the whole airport. So all of that is the big challenge.
Just in terms of the security situation in and around Kabul airport, of course, we have seen our armed forces performing their humanitarian duties, but they are there in a security capacity as well. Just how much of a threat do we think there is in and around the airport at the moment, particularly perhaps from terrorist attack, Al-Qaeda, Islamic State or other kind of groups that may well be affiliated or arriving in country in Afghanistan?
Well, certainly as we get closer to the deadline of the 31st of August, which I know at the G7 there'll no doubt be a discussion about whether that is possible to move, but the Taliban were pretty clear yesterday that as we get closer to the deadline, I think it's correct to say that the security risk goes up. It just gets more and more dangerous as sort of add-on groups and other terrorist groups such as ISIS would like to be seen to take greater credit or like to be seen to chase the West at the airport. That is inevitably going to feed their narrative and their ambitions. The Taliban actually are controlling the outer ring of the airport and indeed checkpoints throughout Kabul. That makes it harder for ISIS terrorists, and the Taliban and ISIS have no friendly relationship at all. But yeah, look, we are very mindful that we're very, very vulnerable should these terrorists choose to do something. And that's why the bravery of our soldiers and indeed of many of those people from other nations doing that job is amazing. They are literally out there amongst very, very desperate people, and the situation could get more insecure. So that's why we're trying everything we can to prioritise people and get them through.
How quickly could we get out of the country if we needed to do so? I know from conversations I've had with a couple of people who are on the ground in Kabul that there are real concerns about the prospect of perhaps even a suicide bomber coming close to the cordon.
Well, look, we have lots of methods. You could obviously seal the gates. You could obviously put yourself behind barriers. That would make it even harder to process members of the Arab scheme or indeed other entitled personnel. And that's a very difficult choice that our men and women of our armed forces have to make literally every minute, which is where do I put myself in order to help this humanitarian crisis. So there are obviously steps you can do. There's also the issue of course, we could leave in a hurry if we had to, but of course the trade-off there is how much equipment do we leave behind, how many more people do we leave behind, and that's why we are working every minute to try and go to the very last minute to take both people out and then take our own personnel out.
Indeed, and of course the question becomes just when that last minute may be. We understand, of course, that the Prime Minister and other allies around the G7 table will be attempting to lobby the US President today to perhaps push past the 31st of August. But, you know, given that which we heard from Sky's interview with the Taliban yesterday about it being a red line, it seems pretty unlikely that there will be any shift.
I think it is unlikely. Not only because of what the Taliban has said, but also if you look at the public statements of President Biden, I think it is unlikely. It is definitely worth us all trying, and we will. And we've also changed internally within our own military system how quickly it can take for us to get out, because for every hour we can squash the military evacuation is an hour we can add on to help the civilian evacuation. And those are the tough choices that myself and Admiral Ben Keyes, the chief commander of the whole operations, of joint operations, have to take, which is, you know, equipment, people, Afghans, and, you know, making sure all of that is done wrapped around safe and security for the people on the ground.
Reports this morning, Minister, indeed, I believe MPs were briefed on it yesterday, that we have collected people from Afghanistan that were on the no-fly list. Can you just tell us a little bit more about that? There seems to be some confusion. One person was on a no-fly list, made it to the United Kingdom, but the assessment at this end was that they didn't pose a security risk. Well,
yes, so two things. People sort of wonder why we don't just effectively open the gates in Kabul and let everyone on a flight. And one of the reasons is that we security screen them. We take their identity, we check it against our databases, and we do our very best to minimise any risk to the United Kingdom should those people come back. But of course, the proportion of people that crop up on that is absolutely tiny, and then they usually get extra checks, or indeed in some cases they get rejected. And I have read in the media some cases of people who are rejected. And I can't publicly say why, but I know that they were not rejected for the reasons they often give the media. And so we have to do that. And that is, quite rightly, that's what we have to be held to account for. I think what you can say about this particular case, and I don't know the details of the individual, but what I can say, having been the security minister, is two things. One is that it worked. I mean, the watch list or the no-fly list pinged and the individual was identified. So that is a plus side, that it worked. And that despite the fact they came through unconventional routes, effectively, from Afghanistan on a military flight onto the UAE and then back to the UK, the system kept a tab of them. And I think that's something that other countries very often don't have. So that's a plus. The second thing is, and I can't give you too much detail because of operational security, but we call it generically the no-fly list, but it has many subdivisions. I mean, it could be that this individual, and this is speculation about this particular individual, but it could be it's no-fly until they're checked. It could be, there are lots of different conditions before they fly. It's not necessarily you are that dangerous you can't come on an airplane. It may be just check who they're flying with before they get on a plane. So I can't speculate on this particular individual, but I think that's why you saw the Home Office statement saying on further examination, the individual himself, I think, was able to proceed. So I don't think I would take the same alarm, and I'm saying I wouldn't pretend otherwise. Having done 3 years as security minister plus, and watched on a daily basis often reports about people, whether they're pinged or not, I wouldn't be as alarmed as some of the media headlines are about this individual. And I would also take some comfort that this process is working and flagging people.
Minister, I wonder if we can turn our attention to a story that appears to have emerged over the past few hours regarding the former Royal Marine, Pen Farthing. He, of course, operating an animal charity in Afghanistan. He claims, having raised £500,000 to repatriate himself, staff and animals, that flight has been blocked by the Ministry of Defence. What's the truth in all of this?
Well, so first of all, look, I've listened to this, and look, Pen Farthing is a British passport holder and has done an amazing thing in Kabul. He was offered a flight out, I think last Friday, or certainly he was called forward to the airport for processing. His own wife, I think, left about the same time and exited the country. And that is our strong advice to him, is to leave the country. No one is blocking the charter flight that people have raised money, other than the fact this is not about flights on the ground and whether or not Pen can get on the flight. This is simply not about, if that aircraft flew in today, it would probably sit there, it would block the airfield, it would sit there empty, because it's about getting, as I said earlier, the flow through the gate, through the barriers, and into the airport and onto the aircraft. There's a confusion, and I think, I'm afraid, some of the campaigners have, latched on to the fact they've chartered a plane as this somehow is the magic wand. The magic wand is whether people can get through Kabul, through the Taliban checkpoints, and then through the 3,000 plus people waiting, some of whom are waiting in front of the queue because they are under real threat, direct threat, right now from Taliban, children, families. We've seen it on your own amazing reporting. I watched your reporter's report first thing this morning. And I am not prepared to prioritise, for example, pets over people. I want people to come through that flow. So this is not about whether you've got a chartered aircraft. It's not about that capacity. I just got off the phone from Admiral Ben Wallace, our joint commander of the whole operation. This is simply about, could he get through the gates, or could his people get through the gates? Now, he could get through the gates, the British passport holder. He was called forward on Friday, and I recommend he takes that. His workforce have been offered as entitled personnel places, and they will be able to be called forward, but I cannot guarantee that in this window they will be processed onto aircraft. All I can say is that they qualify, and as I've said, not everyone will get through. As for the animals that he has rescued and saved, it is just not going to be the case, and I will prioritise them over the men, women and children that we see in desperate need at the gate. And, I regret that, but I don't believe that, that the Taliban's main point of target will be his workforce and indeed the pets and the animals he is looking after, compared to some of those other people desperate in front of the queue.
Sure, but Minister, the argument that is made by Mr Farthing is that this operation, this airlift, was okayed by Downing Street, was okayed by the Prime Minister. Is that just not the case then?
No, first of all, I'm not sure Pen Farthing has been well advised by his UK-based advisor, Dominic Dyer, who I saw a rant on Twitter from him, and he has been incredibly abusive to a range of people, including my advisor. First of all, my advisor does not make decisions on who comes in and out of airports. That is totally misleading to suggest he could block anything. I make decisions, as does Admiral Ben Wallace and my senior military leaders, as does the Foreign Office, who manage the entitled personnel list. So that is just misleading and totally wrong. And I think if Pen understands that, then maybe he won't be making some of the things that I've heard him say today. No one has blocked the plane, other than the fact it is not about a plane. Flying in an aircraft in the middle of a military evacuation, one of the biggest military evacuations of all time, is not going to help the situation, and B, is not the issue. If there were places on our plane and they could get through the queues and they could be processed in time, and that's the key, could they get through the gate? It's not about the plane, then of course they will be on those flights. He has been told that his people and him are eligible to resettle in the UK. As a British passport holder, so is he. But look, frankly, my day job and my evening job and my night job is focusing on those thousands of people outside the front gate. He's been offered a place. Last Friday, he was called forward. I strongly recommend he does that. And once the evacuation is over, I genuinely believe that his workforce, and if he wants to repatriate the pets that he looks after and the strays, I genuinely believe that they will be allowed to move forward after, at a later date when that airport opens. But, frankly, I have to prioritise people at the moment over pets.
Mr Wallace, good to have you on the programme this morning. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Now, still to come on the show, well, you just heard it mentioned at 2:15, we'll be turning our attention to Pen Farthing, the animal sanctuary owner who says that he and his staff have been let down by the government as they remain stuck in Kabul, a position, as you just heard, roundly rebutted by the Defence Secretary. At 8:20, I'll be speaking to a former EU ambassador to the United States to find out what he thinks the virtual G7 meeting on Afghanistan will actually achieve. And I'll be speaking with the TV presenter and comedian Paddy McGuinness about his new documentary, Autism and Our Family, coming your way at 25 to 10. Now, it is the decision which could make the difference between life and death for people trying to flee Afghanistan. Later today, Boris Johnson will try to persuade the US president to extend his deadline for withdrawing troops beyond next Tuesday to allow evacuations to continue. Our chief correspondent Stuart Ramsey has this report from Kabul airport with special access to the British rescue operation to get desperate Afghans to safety.
They're loaded into trucks and vans. Their journeys started days ago, but this is the beginning of perhaps the most important drive they'll ever take. This is the convoy that takes the latest evacuees to the Kabul main airport to board a flight to the UK. Through the gates of the compound where their status has been checked and confirmed, back into the territory of the Taliban and the wilderness of the thousands waiting for news. To the right, in a sewage canal, a holding pen for people who might have the right paperwork. This isn't the hopeless line, this is the hopeful line, but it's utterly awful. They head on through the soldiers of multiple countries looking for people with a right to enter. Then beyond, away from the queues, passing those who have been successful but are now living in what look like refugee camps. Everywhere looks like a refugee camp in a disaster movie, but this is reality. Suddenly it's left behind, inside the wire now, and the start of processing before boarding.
We're going to get a search dog to come out and just do a quick search of there. You will then get your bags back. Okay?
All the travellers have their bags checked. They're allowed one piece each. The UK forces are trying to make it feel like they're on an ordinary flight, conscious how much trauma every single passenger has endured.
This isn't about getting masses of people, herding them together and getting them onto planes. Everything is about making sure we remember that these are our friends. They're people that have worked with us for years and we treat them in that way. So it's about being dressed like this as much as possible. It's about showing them that we're not scared. It's about making sure that children are fed, that babies are looked after, that anything we can do to reduce their stress levels and show them that they're safe is at the heart of what we do here.
Amongst the evacuees are 5-year-old twins Asna and Sana. They're with their mum, dad and brother. The first time twins have been spotted by the RAF. This is the start of their new life, although everything is clearly very strange.
Thank you.
Dad, Naraga, was a UK military translator in Helmand. This flight will save his life for certain. Getting here was terrifying.
I used to be as an interpreter with British Royal Engineers and Helmand Province, so I work a lot with them. Everybody knows about me that he's interpreter, so that's why this was dangerous for me.
And do you think the Taliban would have killed you?
Yes.
No doubt.
Yes, they're going to kill me then, yeah. This was like, everybody was scared, that's what they're going to do. And the first time they're telling to the people that we're going to do nothing for everybody. But nobody knows that they're going to repeat the same thing like in 1996.
The runway and apron are now at full flow. This evacuation effort has to be. Thousands have been moved, even more need to be, but time is running out. Behind the enormous transporter planes, rows of people wait to board, buffeted by the backwash of propellers and jet engines. Lines of people are brought through and positioned, awaiting instructions from the loaders. This is a huge operation, but it's still probably not enough. The latest British flight boards the passengers guided up the loading ramps, seating them along the sides before being directed into rows and secured for the flight.
This is only the second time in RAF history that they've actually used cargo ropes as seatbelts on the floor. The last time within southern Sudan, there's over 130 people on this flight plus cargo. But this is their flight out of Kabul, it's been horrendous for them. They're on the way to new lives. It's for them, I think, it's a dream, I suppose, but I think getting to this point has been horrendous for all of them.
Asna, Sana and their family are on board. They have no plans yet other than to move to southern England, where they believe the weather is better. After what's happened to their lives in a week, just worrying about the weather has got to feel great. Stuart Ramsey, Sky News, Kabul.
Those clearly the lucky ones. Let's speak once again to our correspondent, Sally Lockwood, joining us from Qatar. Sally, good to see you again. I mean, that August 31st date looming large in everyone's minds, no more so than those outside Kabul International Airport. But, you know, following on from your interview yesterday, picked up by the world's media with the Taliban leadership, I mean, it doesn't look likely, does it?
Well, certainly it doesn't appear advisable. The Taliban spokesperson who sat down with us here in Doha certainly emphatic in his warning that 31st of August deadline set by the Biden administration to have all troops out of the country is a red line, and that staying beyond that would have consequences. Of course, Stuart showed there the extraordinary effort being carried out by the British military alongside the Americans and other foreign forces, having to turn their hand to this humanitarian crisis that has unfolded at Kabul airport, a crisis of political making that they are now having to clear up with just days to go. Thousands more people still desperate to be evacuated in that time, just a week to go. And of course, let's not forget, they also have to evacuate themselves safely. And with this deadline fast approaching, politicians are still somehow debating whether it should or shouldn't be extended. We are expecting President Biden to perhaps make his thoughts clear on this at the G7 meeting of leaders later. We're hearing that Boris Johnson will appeal to President Biden to extend this deadline if he hasn't already. And of course, the humanitarian crisis that is unfolding is still something that we will see continue beyond the 31st of August deadline. So what then? What then for humanitarian agencies who need access? What then for potentially any more people who need airlifted out of the country? How will they get access to a flight? I should say that it was an extraordinary airlift effort by the Americans yesterday, airlifting 10,000 people out of Kabul in a 24-hour period. They've certainly ramped up that pace. We expect that pace to continue, but they will need to allow themselves days to evacuate the 6,000 troops on the ground as well. And let's not forget, there are just days left.
Indeed. Sally, many thanks. Now, let's take a run through some of the day's other main stories now. And a record 825 migrants were intercepted across the English Channel on Saturday, and that's the highest daily figure that we've seen this year. It surpasses the previous record for a single day, which was 592, in fact, recorded just a little earlier this month. A fire caused by an illegal sky lantern has taken hold in a nature reserve in Brazil. 6 people have been arrested in connection with the blaze at Franco da Rocha in Sao Paulo. More than 13,500 firefighters are working to contain a series of wildfires that have destroyed hundreds of homes and forced thousands of people to flee to safety in California. 12 major blazes are burning, and almost 50,000 people have been evacuated from their homes. Kathy Hochul has become the first female governor of New York, taking control of the state government after Andrew Cuomo stepped down over sexual harassment allegations. The Democrat from Western New York was sworn in as governor in a private ceremony overseen by the state's chief judge. Time now for the weather. Kirsty standing by.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. I feel like we've been waiting all summer for this high pressure to take charge of the weather across the UK and bring some fine and settled weather. So a lovely end to August, and it's looking good right into the start of September. We have got for many a dry start this morning. There's some overnight cloud and mist and fog around. That should soon lift and break, and then plenty of sunshine across the UK and Ireland. A little bit more cloud at times through parts of Yorkshire over towards Wales, maybe the odd spot of drizzle, but really it's a dry day and warm in the sunshine. We're up to the low 20s 20s, 23, 24. A little bit cooler in the breeze towards northern and eastern coasts. It'll be a dry night tonight, and then tomorrow we do it all over again.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Actually, thanks very much. Still to come on the programme, after 5 long years, the wait is finally over. We'll be taking a look ahead to today's Paralympics opening ceremony in Tokyo.
As you get younger, your risk of getting seriously ill with COVID go down. And this is why we're taking a very cautious approach to this in this country. We're not rushing forward to give vaccine routinely to all healthy children because we want to be sure that there's a clear benefit over the risk ratio and that we're not going to be doing more harm than good. We're very confident that for first doses for healthy 16 and 17-year-olds, that benefit risk ratio is overwhelmingly in favor of receiving that first dose. But people can be reassured that we're taking this cautiously, we're not rushing forward, and we very much don't want to be in a position of later discovering we made the wrong decision. So the benefits are clear for the first dose for this age group. We will be looking very carefully before taking any further steps into younger children or second doses. I don't think we're going to see as many young people receiving the vaccine as the elderly. Old folks like me were living in fear of COVID with very large numbers of serious cases, admissions and deaths. And clearly, as you come down through the age groups, you see those rates coming down. But nevertheless, I think we can be optimistic that the majority of young people will want to receive the vaccine. And of course, we don't have compulsory vaccines in this country. People don't have to have them if they don't want them. And we will see some people not coming forward. But it will contribute to the effort to bringing this pandemic to an end if a majority of people do receive this vaccine. And I think that's what we're going to see.
I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. We take you to the heart of the story that shapes our world.
I use not only design but biology to create new materials which actually are fully sustainable and biodegradable. Because of COVID, there was a mass increase of single-use plastics being discarded. So for me, it seemed like a great opportunity to have a material which didn't have a longevity of plastic but could degrade back into the earth.
Welcome back. After 5 long years of waiting, the stage is finally set for the world's greatest Paralympic athletes in Tokyo. The Games begin today with the opening ceremony at midday UK time. And over the next 12 days, Team GB will be looking to build on their haul of 147 medals in Rio. Joining us now from Tokyo, NBC's sports reporter Heather Cox. Heather, great to see you this morning. You and everyone else there must be desperately excited. 5 long years since the Paralympics, but of course, like the Olympics, taking place against a backdrop of COVID-19.
Indeed, there is a definite air of excitement here. I'm standing in front of the Tokyo Aquatic Center where swimming takes place tomorrow, but today it's all about opening ceremony, which will take place at Olympic Stadium at 8 o'clock local time here in Japan. The event scheduled to last about 4 hours. As always, it will be a secret who's going to light that Paralympic cauldron, but what I can tell you is who will be the flag bearers for Team GB. Swimmer Ellie Simmons and archer John Stubbs will get the honor tonight. Now, John Stubbs did lose his father back in January and said he thinks that his dad would be so proud of this achievement and that he would say, do it for the Stubbs family. You have worked for this, you've earned it, and you deserve it. Now, another interesting note, Tokyo is making history as becoming the first city to host the Paralympic 2 times. They hosted back in 1964. Back then, there were about 375 athletes competing. This year, 4,400 athletes competing. Also to note for tonight at the Paralympic opening ceremony, the Afghanistan flag will be on display in the opening ceremony, even though the athletes were not able to get here to attend and compete. Andrew Parsons, the IPC president, saying we're doing it as a sign of solidarity.
Well, Heather, you enjoy yourself over the next 12 days. Hopefully we'll speak again soon. Thanks very much for joining us. Now, let's take ourselves back to our top story. The Prime Minister chairing an emergency meeting of G7 nations today, where he's expected to try to persuade President Biden to delay the 31st of August deadline for the Afghan withdrawal. In the last half an hour, I asked the Defence Secretary Ben Wallace whether he thinks there's any chance the evacuation mission could continue into next month.
I think it is unlikely. It is definitely worth us all trying, and we will. And we've also changed internally within our own military system how quickly it can take for us to get out, because for every hour we can squash the military evacuation is an hour we can add on to help the civilian evacuation. As we get closer to the deadline, I think it's correct to say that the security risk goes up. It just gets more and more dangerous as sort of add-on groups and other terrorist groups such as ISIS would like to be seen to take greater credit, or like to be seen to chase the West out the airport. That is inevitably going to feed their narrative and their ambitions. The Taliban actually are controlling the outer ring of the airport and indeed checkpoints throughout Kabul. That makes it harder for ISIS terrorists, and the Taliban and ISIS have no friendly relationship at all. But yeah, look, we are very mindful that we're very, very vulnerable should these terrorists choose to do something.
Let's bring in our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen. Morning, TC. It does seem unlikely, given that which we've just heard from the Defence Secretary, that it's unlikely that we're going to see any extension.
Absolutely, and it's not just about Boris Johnson persuading the US president, even though he has the French and the Germans as well saying that they would like a bit more time. It's about, as the Defence Secretary was saying, the viability of the whole thing, given that we know that when the Americans pull out of the airport, everyone else is going to have to as well, because they control all the operations there. And as he was saying, the Taliban have been pretty uncompromising. The conditions on the ground could get very difficult. And you've got other actors there. They've got an Islamic State affiliate who he said would love to have an attack on the West and send them packing. So he says it's a trade-off between pulling out at the very last second and potentially leaving equipment there, or accepting that, as he said yesterday, there are hours, not days. And with still some 1,000 British passport holders to go, and of course thousands of desperate Afghans queuing at those gates, not everyone is going to get out, but they're really stepping up the pace now.
Tomorrow we will speak again throughout the show. For now, thanks very much. Now, as the Taliban approach the presidential palace in Kabul, the country's president of 7 years, Ashraf Ghani, made his getaway to the United Arab Emirates. His decision to leave has brought him intense criticism from other Afghan politicians. Joining us now on the programme is Dr. Omar Zakilwal, Afghanistan's former ambassador to Pakistan and the country's former finance minister. Doctor, great to have you on the programme this morning. Let us start, shall we, with Mr. Ghani. Were you in any way surprised by his decision, like the Americans, to cut and run so quickly?
Personally, not really, because I knew him. Unfortunately, prior to their departure for the past many years, when I parted way with him, I've raised my voice that it was going to lead to this crisis, the way he was managing the government, the way he was managing peace, and the differences between what he spoke and what he did. At the end, he completed his tenure with that shameful act of departure, of running away, in leaving the country in a deep.
I think we may just have lost the line to Kabul there. In fact, no, I'm sorry, Dr. Zakawal, we just lost you just for a second there. Obviously, you are speaking to us from Kabul. I just wonder, you were talking about the former president there. Can you just give us an idea of the conditions that he has left the country in, the way in which the Taliban have been operating in and around where you are?
Well, he's left the country in a deeper crisis. He's left the country in a situation where, of course, we need to find out how we are going to put things back together to give it a normalcy. The situation in the airport, in which thousands of people are trying to flee, this must be reversed, or at a minimum, this must be stopped. There shouldn't be such a panic, such a fear. And that's why I was traveling out of the country when this happened. And when I saw those pictures at the airport, I immediately decided to return to Kabul. I'm in Kabul. I'm in touch with the Taliban. I'm in touch with the very few political leaders, such as former President Hamid Karzai and Dr. Abdullah. We are closely coordinating. We need to, the good thing is that, we see a flexibility in moderate behavior within the Taliban, and we need to take maximum advantage of that. We see a desire within the Taliban for a government that is inclusive. This country's stability, of course, we need to push them more on that. And that's what we will be doing in the days ahead. And I hope that it will bear results.
To what extent, I mean, you mentioned former President Hamid Karzai, but to what extent can voices like his, like yours, you affect the decisions taken by the political leadership of the Taliban, given clearly there is a real urge, a real push from the Taliban to secure the country, to secure its borders, and of course, to see the back of the Americans and the British, well, within the next few days?
Well, in the past years, the Taliban know very well that taking over Kabul many times was not difficult. It happened, but then to continue in governance is not that easy. With very sort of narrow mindset or monopolization of power, we've seen Mujahideen couldn't do it, the communists could not do it, the Taliban did not do it. In the past 20 years, where we ended up with that. So they know that. And we're trying to remind that. And it's not about that they have it all and therefore they should keep it. It's a conversation about the future and the sustainability of the government here, of which there will be a significant part. And they're listening, no doubt about it, and we hope that at the end we will have a government-based settlement, not unilaterally announced by the Taliban, and that we hope will be a government that will be that could hold, that could raise, that could attract international assistance, which is direly needed in this country because the economy is indeed in a dire situation right now. The humanitarian crisis is emerging in this country, and there needs international support, there needs international presence in Afghanistan. But that, to be attracted, it needs a government that's acceptable to the international community as well, and I do believe the Taliban understand that.
Dr. Omar Zakawal, thank you so much for joining us on the programme. Really appreciate your time. Coming up after the break, I'll be speaking to the former Royal Marine in Kabul who says he's been abandoned by the government after we put his case to the Defence Secretary just a little earlier this hour. That's next.
This monastery is under the protection of Russian peacekeepers. I'm Diana Magnay, and I'm Sky's Russia correspondent, based here in Moscow.
They can't arrest everyone.
Now, a former Royal Marine says that he has been let down by the government as he remains stranded in Kabul. He says one of his staff members who is pregnant was evacuated and is now stuck in terrible conditions in Germany. Let us bring in Paul or Pen Farthing from Kabul. Pen, good to see you this morning. And clearly the situation at your end will be concerning. You allege that there was a flight that was blocked by the Ministry of Defence coming to rescue you, rescue your staff, rescue your animals. I just want to play you the response that the Defence Secretary gave to me just a little bit earlier in the programme, and then we'll get you to respond. Just have a listen to what Mr Wallace had to say.
Pen Farthing is a British passport holder and has done an amazing thing in Kabul. He was offered a flight out, I think last Friday, or certainly he was called forward to the airport for processing. His own wife, I think, left about the same time and exited the country. And that is our strong advice to him, is to leave the country. No one is blocking the charter flight that people have raised money, other than the fact this is not about flights on the ground and whether or not Pen can get on the flight. This is simply not about, if that aircraft flew in today, it would probably sit there, it would block the airfield, it would sit there empty, because it's about getting, as I said earlier, the flow through the gate, through the barriers, and into the airport and onto the aircraft.
Pen, the argument from Mr Wallace, who went on to say, I'm not prepared to prioritise pets over people. It's not a question about getting the flight in. It's a question of getting people to the airport. Your response?
Mr Wallace, I never asked you to prioritise pets over people. At no point have I ever said that whatsoever. And we've got a flight and we've said we will wait. You've just got to give us this call sign so that we can actually get it in play. We can get the airline to actually start the flight plans, and then we will sit quite happily and wait. We've got an aircraft that we need to put 69 people on. It's got capacity for 250 people. And in that cargo hold, it'll be empty. I can't put people in a cargo hold, but I can put my animals in that cargo hold. Little animals like Ewok. And there's going to be absolutely no commitment from the British military to help me do that. I just need this ISAF call sign number. And also, I'd like to point out that whilst the Prime Minister has actually given and said that our staff have been granted their visas to travel to England, I've got absolutely no confirmation. I've got nothing in writing. So if I get stopped at a Taliban checkpoint with them, they'll get turned around. And he absolutely knows, Mr. Wallace, that I said I'm not leaving here without my staff. So I'm not going to go to the airport and just go on an airplane so that his problem goes away. That's not going to happen. I served my country for 22 years and the MOD has cancelled my emergency line that I had so that I could get updates on the situation and let them know updates. Hey. He has abandoned me here in Afghanistan and wants me to go quiet. Not going to happen, Mr. Wallace. Not on my watch. You're dealing with the wrong person.
Pen, sorry to interrupt, Pen, but I just want to kind of reiterate the point that the Defence Secretary is making, that it's not about seats on planes or the availability of those. It is about the crush that is taking place outside the airport and the inability, that are thousands of people already waiting there, and the inability of people to get through, to get to the airport. That if your plane did arrive, there would be no way of guaranteeing that anyone would be able to get on it.
Getting into the airport, the British government can't help me with. That's my problem. I'll be in the airport and I shall be there with my staff and with my animals. And if he doesn't allow me to get on that aircraft, then I will have to put all of my dogs and cats asleep on the runway. So I'm going to get into that airport. So he can't, what's he going to tell me not to now? He's just told me to get to the airport and I'm taking my staff and my animals with me. It's that simple. I'm not being dictated to by an MP just because he actually has completely failed this operation to get people off the ground. We are going to end up leaving people behind. This whole thing is absolutely just a disaster. So I'm getting to that airport and I shall be in there with my people, my staff and the animals. And we've got a flight. We need an ISAF call sign. If he doesn't bring that to us, then he will be leaving us at that airport. I'm absolutely disgusted with him. I can't believe he just said that. No, he's picked on the wrong person. I'm not backing down. No way, never.
Pen, we're about to run out of time, but I just want to squeeze in one final question. Again, the point that the Defence Secretary makes is, look, airspace needs to be prioritised. Air traffic control and the number of planes on the ground need to be controlled. You can't simply just fly into Kabul International Airport these days, given the security situation outside the cordon. He does want to get you and your staff out. Sorry, go on.
Yeah, hang on. There are charter flights arriving into that airport.
Yeah.
There are charter flights arriving into this airport. If America can do it, why can't Britain? I'm not taking his excuses. Absolutely not. And I've just seen images of a car being flown out of Afghanistan. If that's true, they're rescuing cars. You've got to be joking me. Sorry, no. I'm not backing down. He's picked on the wrong person. It's not going to happen. I'll be in that airport with my staff and with my animals. I need my flight to be able to land. If other people can bring chartered aircraft in, then so can we.
Pen, we do hope that you and your staff stay very well indeed, very well, very safe. Hopefully we'll speak again soon. Take care and thanks for joining us.
All right, thank you. Appreciate that. Thank you.